Gladiator 2 is one of my biggest disappointments of the year so far, so here's my full spoiler-free thoughts on the best and worst parts of the movie. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying, this is not a bad film by any means. This movie is so incredibly close in the story that's being told to the first Gladiator movie that there's almost zero reason to watch this over the original because it doesn't really improve on anything that the first movie does, it just tries to do the same greatest hits over again. I guess there are minor tweaks to the story, it's not the same exact thing over again, but it might as well will be. There's literally no point for this movie to exist. Like I said, this is not like a terrible movie or anything. I think there are lots of redeeming qualities. A lot of the fight scenes and battle sequences are absolutely epic and have really great moments in them. There's some really creative fights happening, cool shots happening during them, and some of the best reveals and moments of the film are during fight scenes. I think that is what this film excels at. I do think this script is just overall weaker than the first film. It doesn't have the same slow burn that lets the conclusion be as big and epic as the first movie though, and there's not a lot of the emotional stakes and highs. It just doesn't feel like the stakes are anywhere here. I could not get invested in most of the characters. With that being said, I think Paul Mescal and Joseph Quinn are doing very good with the script they were given. I think their performances are very good to great in this film, and especially Paul Mescal. I think he is gonna be one of the all-time great actors in the next decade or so of this next generation. He's gonna make a huge name for himself. I know this sounds really positive. You're like, wait, I thought you said this movie was disappointing, because yeah, as great as their performances are and trying to lift up this very mediocre script, it is still so painfully obvious that they do not have the sauce that Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix had in that first film. It is night and day. Brain rot has taken over, but ignore it while I use the word aura unironically, because that is what Russell Crowe had in the first film. There is something about his performance in that matches the movie so perfectly and just gives you one of my all-time favorite performances, honestly. I think the biggest mistake of this movie is trying to make it so similar to the first Gladiator film, because like I said, Paul Mescal is very good in this film in his own right, but he's definitely not as good as Russell Crowe, but they're basically making him like the same character, it feels like. While I'm talking about performances, I have to bring up Denzel Washington though, because he's another one that, like I said, Paul Mescal, Joseph Quinn, they're really good. Pedro Pascal I don't think was bad, not amazing or anything, but Denzel Washington stands alone as the easily the best part of this entire film. Obviously Denzel's going to give you an A+ performance in everything he's in, and this movie really needed it to punch up the script a little bit, but he also has his own side plot in this movie that I do genuinely think is just like the most interesting part of the film, and I kind of wish it was more about him, honestly. That would have made it an interesting sequel. And if you're thinking, what is this guy talking about? It's a sequel to Gladiator and you're complaining that it's too similar to the first Gladiator film. Let me talk about a few other legacy sequels that I think are a perfect example of how these should work. Blade Runner 2049 and Beetlejuice expand upon the story of the first film and take the world in their own direction, giving you a new and fresh story while there are still familiar aspects and characters. Beetlejuice would have been 10 times worse if it was basically just the first movie with Lydia Deetz' daughter, but no, they have her daughter in the movie and everybody actually has brand new storylines that make it feel completely different than the first film. Then Blade Runner 2049 obviously has a completely different director from, ironically, Ridley Scott, who did the first Blade Runner. They brought in a new visionary to continue the vision in his own unique way while still respecting the original world. So I really don't know if it's more of a case of Ridley Scott being creatively bankrupt at this point of his career, or maybe the studio check to make a sequel to Gladiator was just too big, he couldn't turn it down, and they were pretty much just like, hey, make the same movie again and we'll make millions of dollars. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of you watching this probably really like the film, so make sure to let me know your rating once you've watched it in the comments below, 1 through 10. I don't think it's all bad either. I think there's some really fun action set pieces in this. A lot of the costume design is really great. There's some performances that are doing their best to elevate the script, but overall I was just left asking the question, why does this exist? I want to just watch the first Gladiator. Give it a 6 out of 10, which yes, it's a positive score. It's still an enjoyable movie for me. It's just nothing remarkable, which is so disappointing because this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. It was honestly right up there next to Dune Part 2 if you asked me a year ago.